Hey everyone, Nigel and Luke here, and welcome to Crime Zone. As hard as it is to believe, we're already more than halfway through 2025, and if you've been tuning into this channel for a while now, you know that can mean only one thing. It's time for another edition of Dumbest Criminals, our quarterly recurring series where we take a look at some of the dumbest criminals and crime stories that we've covered so far in a given year on Crimes of the Week. One thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so minor details and things like specific charges may have been updated since we first covered them on Crimes of the Week. Also, if you like these videos, be sure to let us know in the comments section below, as well as keep an eye out for a similar one of these videos at the end of the week where we'll be covering stories exclusively from our Crimes of the Week International series. With that out of the way, let's get into it.
Authorities in Camden County, New Jersey say that a local hairstylist is looking at some serious prison time this week after she was caught allegedly trying to arrange the murder of her police officer ex-boyfriend and his teenage daughter, a plot that she apparently tried to carry out with a man she met on a dating app. The whole thing began early last month when the accused hairdresser in question, 26-year-old Jacqueline Diorio, broke up with her boyfriend, an unidentified Philadelphia police officer. Though it's not clear why the relationship ended between the pair, what we do know is what allegedly happened next. According to the Camden County Prosecutor's Office, near the end of March, Diorio began a new relationship with a man she met through the dating app Tinder. However, rather than starting fresh, she apparently soon made her true intentions clear. In subsequent meetings, text messages, and phone conversations, she allegedly told the man she would pay him $12,000 to act as her hitman. It wasn't just her ex-boyfriend that Diorio wanted dead though. Apparently, in her mind, the $12,000 was a 2-for-1 situation, because she also demanded that the Tinder date kill her ex's 19-year-old daughter as well. Unfortunately for Diorio, it seemed the Tinder date was only pretending to go along with her ridiculous plan. On April 3rd, he turned her into police and became a confidential informant. The following day, he arranged to meet up with the 26-year-old one last time at a Dollar General store, where she reportedly handed over $500 meant to be a down payment on the double murders. As soon as she did, she was surrounded by police, who placed her under arrest. Diorio is now facing 2 counts of first-degree attempted murder, 1 count of first-degree conspiracy to commit murder, and 1 count of third-degree possession of a controlled dangerous substance. The last charge is for a bottle of unlabeled Xanax that officers apparently found on the 26-year-old's person at the time of her arrest. If convicted, Diorio is looking at a hefty prison sentence. The first-degree attempted murder counts alone could reportedly result in a sentence of up to 20 years.
Authorities in the city of Clearwater, Florida say that an unhinged man with a lengthy criminal history is back in custody again this week after he allegedly had a violent freakout at a children's lemonade stand when he was denied a free refill. According to reports, the whole thing fittingly went down on April Fool's Day when the 45-year-old suspect, Stephen Cusimano, was walking through a residential area on the south side of the city. At around 7:45 p.m., he came across a lemonade stand run by a group of local children near the intersection of Pinellas Street and South Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. After deciding to stop, he proceeded to purchase a glass from the group of young entrepreneurs. However, things quickly turned sour when Cusimano demanded a free refill and was told no. Apparently unable to accept this, he allegedly had a full-blown meltdown and forcefully grabbed an unidentified female victim there by the wrist. He then assumed a fighting stance and told her he would beat her up. Thankfully, the 45-year-old ran off before things got even more heated and was arrested a short distance away. Though he apparently admitted to everything that had happened, he defended his behavior by claiming that the female victim was, quote, talking shit to me. Police reports do not identify the victim by name or age, but again, given that this was a children's lemonade stand, it's safe to assume she was likely a minor. Anyway, after being arrested, Cusimano was slapped with a felony battery charge, an enhanced offense due to his extensive prior criminal history. That history reportedly includes prior convictions for battery, as well as convictions for trespassing, narcotics possession, disorderly intoxication, assault with a deadly weapon, theft, and disorderly conduct. Somewhat ironically, you might say that life has now given Cusimano his fair share of lemons, but only time will tell if he'll use them to make his own lemonade, rather than trying to steal someone else's. A Florida man became the latest poster boy for the phrase, "don't drink and drive," last week, when he brazenly offered police a sip of his alcoholic beverage during the middle of a car chase. The whole thing began on the afternoon of April 19th, when the Highlands County Sheriff's Office received a call about a theft at a local convenience store. Moments earlier, a man, later identified as 39-year-old Richard Christopher Smith, had allegedly stolen several items, including alcohol, from the Spring Lake market before walking out. Officers arrived at the scene just in time to see Smith driving off in a black minivan, prompting them to begin a pursuit. However, they had no idea just how ridiculous the situation would get.
Stop! Stop! I said give you a drink, that's it! He's drinking some, looked like a beer or something. He just drove by, he's back towards Lakeview.
The drink that Smith was offering was not, in fact, a beer. It was a Kettle One vodka spritzer. Nonetheless, the footage is pretty astonishing. It appears that police were likewise left pretty dumbfounded, writing in a Facebook post about the incident this week, quote, "We don't know if he was expecting us to just say cheers and let him go or what." Of course, police did not let him go, and instead the chase continued for several more minutes. During that time, spike strips were deployed, and all 4 of the tires on Smith's vehicle were flattened. This brought him to a stop, though not before he allegedly attempted to ram 2 patrol cars. Even after this, the 39-year-old appeared completely unfazed. As you can see, he got out of his minivan and lit up a cigarette as he attempted to walk away from the scene. Smith continued to ignore orders from deputies right up until he was tased in the middle of the road and placed in handcuffs. Even after losing his freedom, the 39-year-old apparently did not lose his sense of humor, though, and continued to make a joke out of the whole thing.
Put your hands behind your back! A lot of stupid right now.
Let's have fun, all right?
Smith is now facing a slew of charges, including aggravated assault on a law enforcement officer, battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting arrest, DUI, refusal to submit to a DUI test, and petty theft. Authorities in Springfield, Missouri released the details of a bizarre crime this week, revealing that a local man offered quite the novel excuse after he was recently caught for allegedly fleeing the scene of an accident. The whole thing took place back on the night of February 27th at a come-and-go convenience store. That evening, the suspect, 60-year-old Dale Hammett, had gone to the business, presumably to purchase a couple of last-minute items. However, before he could get out of his vehicle, he messed up big time. While sitting in his 2012 Dodge Ram, he accidentally rammed the front windows of the building. That was just his first mistake, though. You see, rather than getting out to provide information or call for help, he simply backed up and drove off. Things get even weirder because according to a probable cause statement, Hammett came back to the store twice that same night. However, it wasn't to fess up. Instead, the 60-year-old reportedly denied any wrongdoing both to employees at the business and police, even after he was shown the security footage of the crash. As you might imagine, though, since the whole thing was on film, it wasn't hard to link Hammett and his truck to the incident. When police paid him a visit at his home about half a mile away, he finally admitted to what had happened, but claimed that it wasn't his fault. Instead, Hammett blamed his shoes. Specifically, he had said that his Crocs had gotten stuck in the accelerator pedal of his vehicle, causing him to fly forward and crash into the convenience store. He said that afterwards he had panicked and that's why he fled. Unfortunately for Hammett, his Croc-related excuse didn't help his case much. Because the collision did more than $3,700 worth of damage and he fled the scene, he has now been charged with leaving the scene of an accident where property damage exceeded $1,000. While it's unclear if there was anything else going on that might have contributed to the crash, we do know that Hammett has a history of making poor choices. After all, he knowingly purchased and wore a pair of Crocs in public in the first place. If you ask me, the only appropriate penalty here is a life sentence. All kidding aside, though, because this is a felony, Hammett is facing between 1 and 4 years in jail, as well as a maximum fine of $10,000. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a lottery winner decided to stupidly push his own incredible luck this week, causing him to wind up behind bars just days after he collected his jackpot winnings. According to reports, the whole thing began on the evening of April 29th, when the lottery winner in question, 50-year-old James Farthing, was at the Tradewinds Resort in the city of St. Pete Beach. He was apparently there to celebrate after hitting it big a few days earlier. You see, on April 26th, he purchased the winning ticket back in his home state of Kentucky for the state's Powerball draw. The jackpot was worth more than $167 million, a prize which he decided to split with his 77-year-old mother. However, just one day after posing with his giant novelty check, Farthing apparently decided to push his luck once again. While at the trade winds, he and his girlfriend, 42-year-old Jacqueline Fightmaster, reportedly got into a drunken and violent altercation between themselves and several other patrons at the resort. Things escalated even further when, after allegedly punching a man in the face, Farthing attacked a deputy that tried to intervene and break up the fight. That deputy was reportedly kicked in the face by the 50-year-old, who then made things even worse for himself by attempting to flee the scene. Meanwhile, Jacqueline Fightmaster was more than living up to her unusual surname. The 42-year-old was allegedly involved in physical altercations of her own with several other people at the resort's bar. According to police reports, she, quote, appeared very intoxicated and was yelling, screaming, and making incoherent statements. When it was all over, Farthing was arrested and charged with felony battery on a law enforcement officer, plus 2 other misdemeanor offenses. Fightmaster, meanwhile, was busted for causing a disturbance. Unfortunately for the couple, this isn't the end of their problems, though. You see, at the time of the incident, Farthing was on parole in Kentucky related to a 14-year prison sentence he had previously served. So while Farthing was granted bond in the Florida case, he is still being held due to a parole violation warrant in Kentucky. Apparently, he did not have permission to leave the state in the first place. At the time of this recording, he remains in custody.
A Michigan man won't be winning any Father of the Year awards, but definitely is facing criminal charges after he allegedly forced his adolescent daughter to help him commit a home invasion last week, then ditched her when they were caught in the act. The whole thing began on the evening of April 29th, when the man in question, 29-year-old Andre Stefan Curtis Broadenax, allegedly stole a car in the city of Dearborn Heights. According to police, he then used the vehicle to drive himself and his 11-year-old daughter to an address in neighboring Detroit, where he forced the young girl to take part in a home invasion. However, after the pair forced their way into the property on the 600 block of Marquette Drive, they were apparently caught by the son of the 75-year-old homeowner. When they were, Broadenax reportedly took off immediately on foot, leaving his daughter behind to take the blame for the whole thing. While Broadenax was caught shortly afterwards and police quickly pieced together what had actually happened, that's not really the point. Aside from the illegality of the whole thing, the bigger issue is that Broadenax put his young daughter in an incredibly dangerous situation. As one resident in the area stated during an interview with reporters, quote, "Right now you could have just lost your life and your child's, so it's really sad." Following his arrest, Broadenax was charged with first-degree home invasion, second-degree home invasion, larceny in a building, receiving and concealing a motor vehicle, inducing a minor to commit felony, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. He currently remains in custody.
A South Carolina man may want to get his funny bone examined, but first he'll have to get out of jail, following a bizarre incident this week in which he allegedly broke into his ex-girlfriend's house and attacked her, claiming afterwards that the whole thing was a practical joke. The whole thing started shortly before midnight on May 3rd, when the female victim, who has not been identified by name, returned to her home in the city of Charleston. According to reports, the young woman shares a residence with her family, but she lives in a separate apartment connected to the garage. So imagine her surprise when she walked in that night and discovered she wasn't alone. After heading through the door, the woman was allegedly ambushed by a man who was hiding in her shower. The man's face was covered and he was wearing a gray sweatshirt, but he was naked from the waist down. He was also armed with a knife and proceeded to attack her. The female victim would later tell police that upon seeing this person in her home, who she initially believed was a stranger, she thought she was about to be sexually assaulted and killed, especially when she screamed and the man held a knife up to her head and imitated slitting her throat. Moments later, she said the man choked her with one of his hands, applying enough pressure to prevent her from breathing. The woman fought back, and as she did, she started to realize something strange about the man's outfit. The covering he was wearing on his head was a pair of her own bike shorts, as well as a tan baseball cap. After she was able to pull these off, she recognized her attacker as her on-again, off-again boyfriend, 25-year-old Jackson Arnold. It was only at this point, apparently, that Arnold stopped assaulting the victim. But that's when things got even crazier. You see, according to Arnold, the whole thing was just a prank. Yes, that's right. He claimed he broke into his ex's house under the cover of darkness, hid inside her shower with no pants on, and then attacked her with a knife because he thought it would be funny. In his words, he wanted to, quote, lighten the mood because they had been arguing over text earlier that day. Unfortunately for Arnold, his so-called prank didn't end with the belly laughs and backslaps he allegedly intended. Instead, his ex was pretty sure this wasn't a joke at all, and instead ran into the main part of the house and had her family call the police. In case you're wondering, no, there wasn't any kind of prior precedent of Arnold being allowed into his ex's place without her present. According to a police report, he had never lived at the address previously, had never been given a key, and did not have permission to come and go as he pleased. It's currently not known how he got in, though it's suspected he used a side door which had a lock that didn't work correctly. On top of all of this, it's been reported that the 25-year-old parked several hundred feet down the road from the residence so that the female victim would not spot his car when she got home. Arnold was arrested a short time later, though at least by this point it seems he had put some pants on. He's now facing charges including assault and battery, first-degree burglary, and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Representatives from Ohio's Springfield Township Police Department say that what started out as a simple traffic stop got far stranger this week after a woman was pulled over for a violation and she ended up getting busted for something else entirely, thanks to her pet raccoon. According to a Facebook post put out by the department this week, the whole thing started around 7:15 p.m. on May 5th, when an officer conducted the stop in question just off of South Arlington Road. The officer pulled over 55-year-old Victoria Vidal after he realized she had an active warrant out and was driving with a suspended license. The whole thing was pretty standard until after placing Vidal under arrest and putting her in the back of his cruiser, the officer returned to her vehicle. And let's just say, what was waiting for him in the front seat was surprising.
Oh. Hey.
What?
I come here.
Hello?
The raccoon has her pipe.
As what?
Oh my god.
Her meth pipe.
Yes, that's right, a raccoon with a meth pipe. Not just any raccoon, though. Vidal's pet raccoon, whose name is Chewy. In what is perhaps the strangest genesis of probable cause I've ever heard of, the discovery of the meth-smoking trash panda led to a further search of Vidal's vehicle. That's where officers allegedly discovered what they described as a bulk amount of methamphetamine, an undisclosed amount of crack cocaine, and 2 more pipes. As crazy as all of this is, I'd argue that's not even the most bizarre twist in the case. You see, despite Vidal's alleged illegal activities, the one area where she was apparently following the law was in terms of her pet ownership. According to police, she had the proper paperwork for Chewy, and it's legal to own raccoons in the state of Ohio. Now, whether or not she'll get Chewy back, though, is another question. I mean, he looked quite comfortable handling that meth pipe, so I think it's safe to say authorities had some concerns for his well-being. At the time of this recording, Vidal remains in custody on multiple drug charges as well as driving under suspension. She's expected to face more charges in the coming days. It's unclear where Chewy the raccoon currently is, though reports say he was unharmed at the time of the arrest. A Nebraska Star Wars enthusiast apparently role-played himself right into jail recently after he was allegedly involved in an unhinged episode targeting his neighbors. Though he didn't so much use the Force, just regular Force. According to reports, it all unfolded last month on the evening of April 28th when a group of kids were playing outside in the city of Auburn. That's when the suspect, 25-year-old Aiden Orion White, went up to them wielding a toy lightsaber. Moments later, he allegedly hit a 7-year-old girl who also happened to be his neighbor. As you might imagine, when the girl ran crying back to her mom, 37-year-old Sandra Lunds Mann, she wasn't too happy. However, when she attempted to confront White, his Jedi-themed rampage only continued. Before charging at and striking her multiple times with the lightsaber as well, White reportedly yelled, quote, "I'm not in the mood. Get back in your f***ing house." When police were called, White reportedly spoke to them quite calmly and seemed apologetic, though he apparently couldn't help but get angry when he started talking about his neighbors. In a report about the incident, officers noted that the 25-year-old would, quote, "have profane and angry outbursts." He supposedly blamed Sandra and her family for his rent recently going up, and also threatened that they would have future problems. Perhaps the most bizarre part of the report concerns the lightsaber itself, though, which authorities seem to stress was not merely a toy. I mean, it was a toy in the sense that all lightsabers are toys because they don't really exist, but I think what they were getting at was more that it was quite hefty. Specifically, the report describes it as a, quote, "higher quality device, approximately 3.5 feet long, constructed of metal and thick plastic." A deputy further noted that the lightsaber could, quote, "cause significant pain and injury when used to strike an individual." When it was all over, Aiden White was arrested and charged with 2 felony assault counts. The 25-year-old was held in lieu of $50,000 bail, and according to reports, his lightsaber was seized. Perhaps unsurprisingly, a judge also ordered that he undergo a mental competency evaluation. Authorities in Port St. Lucie, Florida, say that a woman's desire for a late-night snack ended with her wife behind bars after her craving for food became an argument that quickly spiraled into a full-blown violent episode. The whole thing reportedly began at around 3 o'clock in the morning on May 3rd, when the 40-year-old victim and her 39-year-old wife, Allison Swan, were supposed to be relaxing after working late. The pair are both nurses and were hanging out at their home on South Buttonwood Drive. That was, until the 40-year-old got a craving for nachos. As she was in the kitchen preparing her chips and adding some nacho cheese, Swan reportedly became agitated. According to a subsequent police report, she told her wife that she, quote, "shouldn't be eating this late," and made a comment about her weight. As you might imagine, this prompted an argument, and apparently not content with simply making nasty comments, Swan also quickly became violent. After leaving behind the video game she'd been playing in the living room, the 39-year-old allegedly walked over to her wife in the kitchen and grabbed a handful of her food. She then proceeded to shove the nachos, cheese and all, down the back of her pants. While this is definitely unhinged, you could at least argue that nothing up to this point warranted police intervention. Unfortunately, though, this also soon changed. You see, when the 40-year-old victim tried to get some new clothes, Swan allegedly dragged her to the ground, shoved her fingers into her mouth and hooked her cheeks like a fish, then began slamming her head into the floor repeatedly. A friend who was apparently on the phone with the victim overheard what was going on and called 911. If this wasn't wild enough, when officers showed up, Swan reportedly tried to escape responsibility by coming up with a ridiculous story. She told police that her wife was in a drunken rage and had simply thrown her own nachos on the floor and rolled around in them. Officers did not buy this excuse, though, particularly when they saw the cheese on the inside of the victim's pants. Swan was arrested for domestic battery. She was later freed from the county jail on $250 bond, though was ordered to stay away from her wife's car and place of employment, and their shared residence. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I enjoyed going to the hardware store with my dad. Not because I was particularly interested in building or anything, but because me and my siblings liked to run around and look at all the demo furniture and equipment that had been set up. Of course, the absolute pinnacle of this was always those little storage/tool sheds that they have outside on display. Mostly because when you're a child, anything that can be used as a fort is automatically awesome. It turns out, though, 7-year-old me wasn't the only one that saw the utility in this. This week, a Louisiana man made headlines after he became enamored with one of these sheds as well. However, as I'm sure you've already guessed since this made the news, he had decidedly less innocent intentions. You see, rather than playing in the shed, he was playing with himself in the shed, if you catch my drift. The whole thing started sometime on May 11th when police responded to a Lowe's home improvement store in the city of Slidell. They were called there after someone phoned 911 explaining that a naked man was inside of one of the store's display sheds. When officers got there and checked the situation out, they were treated to what was perhaps the world's worst Monty Hall game. They began opening the doors of the sheds until they came across 66-year-old James Kaliavas. And let's just say, they weren't exactly thrilled with what they found behind door number 2, so to speak. According to police reports, Kaliavas was lying on his back inside one of the sheds with his pants around his ankles and an open container of Vaseline by his side. He was, pleasuring himself while watching YouTube. Kaliavas reportedly admitted to what he was doing, though, that was fairly obvious. He was quickly arrested for obscenity and taken to a local jail. As a strange final twist to all of this, apparently Kaliavas is originally from the city of Jasper, Georgia, and if you look up the address listed for him in public records, he's listed as owning a 1-acre property with a small trailer on it. However, the only pictures available show a small storage shed instead. So when he was caught this week, you might say the 66-year-old was merely making himself at home. Authorities in Charlotte, North Carolina say that one fast food employee is facing charges and another is lucky to be alive after a senseless workplace dispute over burnt food last week escalated into what could have been a deadly shooting. The whole thing unfolded on the evening of May 11th at a Popeye's chicken restaurant near the intersection of South Boulevard and Carolina Pavilion Drive. It began around 6 p.m. when two managers at the location got into an argument, one which a customer later told police started over burnt biscuits. While it's unclear exactly who burned the biscuits, or really what was going on in general, we do know that things escalated quickly. It happened when one of the managers challenged the other to take the disagreement outside. During a subsequent fistfight, one of the managers, later identified as 22-year-old Rodney Wood, allegedly pulled out a gun and started shooting. The male victim was hit in the groin and chest, at which point Wood fled the scene. When officers from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg police arrived at the scene, the injured man was rushed to a hospital where he underwent emergency surgery. Wood, meanwhile, was arrested a short time later in the same shopping plaza where the whole thing took place. According to police, during a conversation, Wood claimed that he shot his fellow manager in self-defense after he was punched several times in the face. He also stated that the rounds he fired were, quote, warning shots that were not intended to hurt his colleague. However, authorities did not buy this explanation, particularly when they saw footage of the incident, which allegedly showed Wood shooting the other man at close range. On top of this, police say that the two managers had issues with each other in the past, and that Wood had previously asked for a transfer from the Popeyes location because he didn't want to work with the victim. At the time of this recording, Wood remains in custody on one count of attempted first-degree murder. Well, we've got another weird one for you to close out the show this week. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a local ex-convict landed himself back behind bars this week after he was caught violating his parole thanks in part to the Hot Chip Challenge. For those unfamiliar, the Hot Chip Challenge refers to a popular social media trend where people film themselves consuming a single chip, usually a tortilla chip, that has incredibly spicy seasoning on it. These are made by a variety of different companies and typically sold individually, but they all have one thing in common. The chips are made to rank as highly as possible on the Scoville heat scale. The particular Hot Chip Challenge contender we're concerned with, though, is 36-year-old Darren Dykes. According to reports, Dykes decided to put his taste buds to the test back on March 25th of this year while he was hanging out with some friends. The footage of this was apparently posted to social media, which is how Dykes' probation officer came across it. And after reviewing the video this week, Dykes was placed under arrest. If you're confused, it wasn't the hot chip itself that got Dykes in trouble. It was what he washed it down with. When the heat started to kick in, he could be seen chugging down a beer, a violation of his parole which required him to stay away from alcohol. During his meeting with the probation officer, Dykes reportedly admitted to having, quote, a swig of the beer, though given his history, the officer didn't buy this. The 36-year-old's records indicate he is, quote, a risk to himself and others with any further alcohol use. It's unclear how long Dykes will now be behind bars, though reports note that he has spent a combined total of 7 years in state prison. His criminal history includes convictions for dealing in stolen property, cocaine sales, grand theft, credit card fraud, heroin possession, cocaine possession, theft, burglary, and violating a domestic violence protection order.
Authorities in the city of Shreveport, Louisiana have lambasted the actions of a local mother this week after she was accused of dumping her own kids at the side of the road before allegedly attempting to cover up what she had done by reporting them missing. The whole thing began sometime on May 28th when the mom in question, 33-year-old Lakeisha Washington, was driving with her kids and they got into an argument. It's unclear what the argument was about, but we do know what allegedly happened next. According to reports, Washington got so fed up with her 11 and 12-year-old that she stopped her car near the intersection of Hollywood and Broadway Avenue and ordered them to get out of the vehicle. Moments later, she took off, leaving the kids to fend for themselves. The 11 and 12-year-old did eventually walk 4 miles to the closest relative's house. However, Washington didn't know that. So in an apparent bid to explain the situation, she called local police and claimed her adolescent children were missing. Unfortunately for Washington, though, it seems the whole thing quickly blew up in her face. As she was talking to officers at her home on the 3400 block of Palm Road, they received word that the kids were safe. They also learned the real story about what had happened. Shortly after this, Washington was arrested and charged with 2 counts of criminal neglect of family. Police say they also passed along the details of what happened to the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. Shortly after this, Washington was arrested and charged with 2 counts of criminal neglect of family.
A Washington grandfather's quick and courageous actions may have saved his family's lives last week after an unhinged food delivery app worker showed up at his daughter's house drunk and armed, demanding a tip. The whole thing unfolded on the morning of May 29th, when the grandfather in question, Anthony Valino, was in the middle of breakfast with his grandchildren at his daughter's place in the city of Vancouver. Suddenly, the family meal was interrupted by loud banging at the front door. When Anthony's daughter opened up, she was confronted by a man, later identified as 59-year-old Robert Delahant. Immediately, the woman could smell alcohol on Delahant's breath as he started to go into a drunken rant. Delahant explained that he had made a DoorDash delivery to the woman's address the night before when she ordered about $100 worth of groceries. He said he had come back that morning because he felt he was owed a tip. Initially, Anthony said that he considered giving Delahant a couple bucks, but as his behavior got more and more aggressive, he changed his mind. That's when he got up and took over the interaction, telling Delahant he needed to leave. However, things quickly escalated when Anthony noticed that the 59-year-old had a handgun strapped to his waist. That's when he realized he was in a fight for his life. In wild home surveillance footage that partially captured what happened next, you can see Anthony struggling with Delahant and moving him away from the front door. He's able to get the gun away from the unhinged DoorDash driver, pushing him up against a vehicle in the driveway as he works to clear the weapon of ammunition. Both men ended up calling 911, though for obvious reasons, Delahant was the only one who was arrested in the end. He is now facing charges including felony harassment, driving under the influence, and assault. Perhaps the most ridiculous part of the whole thing, though, is that Delahant did get a tip. Anthony's daughter had immediately tipped the 59-year-old through the DoorDash app at the time of the initial delivery. So apparently the money Delahant was demanding was an additional tip that he wanted in cash. In an interview with local media after the ordeal, Anthony talked about how shocked he was by the bizarre and dangerous situation. He told reporters in part, quote, "I could have been shot. My kids could have been shot. If he would have gotten his hands on that gun, somebody could have gotten hurt. I still can't believe it happened. He can't make that decision that I am going to somebody's house to get a cash tip." For their part, DoorDash released a statement following the incident, stressing that they have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment. They say Delahant was immediately removed from the app when the situation was brought to their attention. Authorities in the city of Murray, Kentucky say that a notorious local nuisance is facing fresh charges following a bizarre incident last week in which he allegedly released a live animal into a crowded bar as revenge for being kicked out. The whole thing started shortly after 9 p.m. on June 6th when the man in question, 40-year-old Jonathan Mason, walked into the Big Apple Grill and Bar, located on the 1000 block of Arcadia Circle. Mason had barely had a chance to grab a drink, though, before he was approached by one of the bartenders there and asked to leave. The reason for this was that Mason had already been banned from the establishment previously, and he had quite the reputation around the city's bars in general for causing problems. In fact, locals know him better by the nickname Cowboy Cody, which I promise will make sense in just a second. Anyway, after spotting Mason, the bartender, 37-year-old Mary Hafner, took it upon herself to ask him to leave. She'd worked there for a number of years, and her relationship with the 40-year-old was better than most of her coworkers. She figured if she just asked Mason to go nicely, maybe he wouldn't cause a scene. For a split second, it seemed like maybe this had worked. Mason said, quote, "Oh, I see how it is. They sent a pretty face out here to distract me." But he did head towards the door. Unfortunately, though, moments later, he returned, and this time, he wasn't alone. To the disbelief of everyone present, Mason proceeded to release a wild raccoon into the bar before fleeing in his vehicle. In video footage recorded of the strange incident, an employee at the bar can be seen crawling around on the floor as the frightened animal scurries between tables and chairs. This was apparently against the advice of Mary, who said that she would take care of the raccoon. And from the sounds of it, her colleague should have listened. Moments later, after grabbing the animal's tail, the male employee was bitten by the raccoon. Because, what would you do if someone tried to grab your tail? According to reports, the man later had to get a rabies shot. In the end, Mary did get everything back under control, though. After nonchalantly wrapping the raccoon in a towel, she carried it outside and set it free. She later told reporters, quote, "I'm a Kentucky girl. I had no problem catching him." As for Mason, he was quickly arrested by police later that same evening, though not before making things difficult by refusing to exit his vehicle or roll down the window so officers could speak to him. However, it seems authorities pretty much expected this given their history with him. You see, this is far from the 40-year-old's first run-in with police, and not even Mason's first animal-related crime. Just a few months ago, in December of 2024, he was arrested twice within 2 days, following incidents where he led officers on separate drunken chases through the city while riding a mule. At least one of those incidents also started at the Big Apple Grill and Bar when employees saw Mason beating the animal with a whip in the parking lot. As for where Mason got the raccoon involved in this week's incident, it's believed he caught it on the farm where he lives earlier that same day. He is now facing a number of charges, including third-degree criminal trespass, second-degree assault, resisting arrest, and failure to maintain insurance. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida, say that a Saudi Arabian man learned the hard way not to waste police resources this week after he called 911 on a local strip club after allegedly failing to illegally pay for sex. The whole thing began at around 1 a.m. on June 8th when Pinellas County police were called to the Oz Gentlemen's Club in the city of Clearwater. The 911 call was placed by a 21-year-old man named Sultan Al-Nofe, who said that he wanted people there to be arrested. When officers arrived and asked what was going on, the noticeably intoxicated 21-year-old claimed that the club's security had stolen $300 from him. While reportedly slurring his words and reeking of booze, he explained that he had paid the money for access to a private room where he had asked an employee for sex. When this was refused, he felt that the services he thought he was paying for had not been rendered. As a result, he now wanted the staff who had taken the money from him sent to jail. It's unclear if the level of entitlement here was because of the alcohol or whether Al-Nofe simply forgot what country he was in, but regardless, he soon discovered that things were not going to go his way. While it seems police ignored the whole illegal solicitation thing, he was arrested for misuse of the 911 system for wasting police resources. According to reports, Al-Nofe was later bailed out of jail by an instructor at a Miami flight school. It's unclear whether the 21-year-old is a student there or if he is even employed, though apparently he currently lives in Broward County. Authorities in Lake County, Florida say that a 70-year-old man was recently arrested and is facing charges after he allegedly contaminated thousands of dollars worth of canned goods at a store by relieving himself on the products. The whole thing took place shortly before 10 a.m. on May 30th, when the suspect, Patrick Mitchell, took a trip to his local Sam's Club in the city of Lady Lake. After entering the business, he reportedly made a beeline for aisle 18, where he was observed by a witness in a rather unsavory position. According to reports, the female shopper snapped a photo of Mitchell as he pulled down the front of his pants and began pissing on 2 pallets full of Spam and Vienna sausages. The horrified witness alerted employees, who were able to confirm what had happened on the store's surveillance camera system. Police reports note that the footage captured the 70-year-old as he, quote, placed both his hands in front of him below the belt line and stood there for several seconds, behavior consistent with urination. As weird as this already was, what was even stranger was that Mitchell apparently hung around for a bit afterwards. The same surveillance video revealed that he'd stopped by the snack section and had taken the time to try out some patio furniture before paying for some items and finally leaving. While the whole thing might be somewhat amusing for you and I, the same obviously can't be said for the Sam's Club employees tasked with cleaning up Mitchell's mess. According to the company, Mitchell's impromptu bathroom break also forced him to throw out 188 bulk units of Vienna sausages and 345 units of 8-count Spam Classic. The combined value of this is said to be more than $10,500. Unfortunately for Mitchell, he'd picked a pretty stupid place to illegally drain the main vein. Since you require a photo ID membership to even enter Sam's Club, it was pretty easy to cross-reference this with his purchases and the surveillance footage. He was arrested and is now facing charges of disorderly conduct and felony criminal mischief. Well, folks, this next story might be one of the strangest that we've covered in a while. And given what we normally talk about here, that's really saying something. A muscle-bound social media influencer has been arrested and is facing charges this week after a torrent of bizarre and threatening social media posts allegedly taking aim at one of the world's largest podcasters. The whole thing started on June 23rd, when 47-year-old Brian Johnson began posting the series of videos in question to his Instagram feed. Now, if you don't recognize this guy yet, that's okay. Chances are you know him by a different name. Online, he's known as the Liver King. Over the last few years, he's built up a massive social media following around his so-called caveman lifestyle. Perhaps more than anything, he's known for his bizarre eating habits, frequently dining on raw meat, especially animal livers. And he rose to prominence crediting his bizarre lifestyle and dietary choices for his massive physique. That was until late 2022, when he was caught lying about the massive quantity of steroids he was using that were costing him upwards of $11,000 per month. Since then, it seems he's been going through a bit of a downward spiral, to put it lightly. There's one other thing that's important to understand in terms of background here, and that's that one of the people who had frequently questioned the Liver King's legitimacy before he was exposed was none other than the famous podcaster and UFC commentator Joe Rogan. While the Liver King has never appeared on Rogan's show, his name has been mentioned frequently on the podcast, most often when the subject of performance-enhancing drugs comes up, and it would appear that the Liver King has not taken kindly to this. Even though he's literally known for eating raw meat, you might say he's not enjoying this particular beef. That brings us to the situation this week and those videos that the Liver King started posting. The videos in question were mostly a series of strange rants, but they quickly took on a more disturbing tone when Brian Johnson revealed that he had shown up in Joe Rogan's home city of Austin and was there because he wanted to challenge him to a fight. In one particularly unhinged video, the Liver King can be seen shirtless while wearing some kind of wolf skin headdress and appearing to hold 2 gold-colored firearms. He proceeds to say in part, quote, "Joe Rogan, I'm calling you out. My name's Liver King. Man to man, I'm picking a fight with you. I have 0 training in jiu-jitsu. You're a black belt. You should dismantle me, but I'm picking a fight with you. Your rules. You can't pick a fight with a real king and then expect there to not be an actual fight, bro." When police were alerted about the situation and contacted Rogan, he reportedly told them that he'd never had any contact with Brian Johnson and was unsure why he was coming after him. He went on to say that he had heard the 47-year-old had a significant drug problem, appeared unstable, and seemed like he was in need of help. The following day, the Liver King was arrested at the Four Seasons Hotel where he was staying in Austin. Further videos he recorded and posted to his social media accounts show him pacing around the room and ranting, seemingly aware of what was about to happen. He was taken into custody around 8:30 p.m. on a charge of making a terroristic threat. Strangely, the situation doesn't end there though, because almost immediately after the Liver King was released from jail, he went right back to posting. In these new videos, the 47-year-old still appeared to be fixated on Joe Rogan, though appeared to be wary of mentioning him directly by name again. While showing off his ankle monitor, he revealed that he had been, quote, given the gift of a restraining order that required him to stay at least 600 feet away from the podcaster and his family. He also weirdly joked at one point that he actually wanted to fight Seth Rogen instead. At the time of this recording, it still seems very possible that more could happen here. In fact, the Liver King has threatened as much. In one of his latest posts, he stated in part, quote, I don't want to give any details nor any names. That's how you get ready for a fight. And you thought the videos would stop, but they will never stop. You've got an infinite amount of venom, and then we'll hug and unite. At some point, you have to capitulate something. Real tension, real fight. That being said, for the moment, Brian Liver King Johnson remains out of jail on $20,000 bond.
A Massachusetts man is facing a long list of charges this week after police say he pulled over on the side of a highway to chug a beer, only to be caught minutes later driving more than 120 miles an hour. According to Connecticut State Police, the whole thing began at around 1 a.m. on Sunday, June 22nd, along I-84 West in West Hartford. Troopers first noticed a Chevrolet Traverse parked in the right shoulder near exit 44, with all of the SUV's occupants standing outside the vehicle. Thinking something might be wrong, police started to loop around so they could check on them. However, before troopers could get back, the Chevy and its passengers were gone. A short time later, a different state trooper spotted the same SUV again, this time near exit 39, and it was hard to miss. The vehicle was allegedly barreling down the highway at 122 miles an hour in a 65 zone, while also swerving and failing to stay in a single lane. Officers quickly pulled the driver over near exit 37 in Farmington, where he was identified as 23-year-old Carlos Gallegos Loja of Brockton, Massachusetts. Police say that Gallegos Loja showed clear signs of impairment, including slow actions and slurred speech. In an admission that probably didn't help his case, Gallegos Loja told officers that the first time police noticed him pulled over on the shoulder earlier that night, it was because he'd stopped to chug a beer. Troopers also reported finding open alcohol containers inside the SUV. As a result, Gallegos Loja was arrested on the spot after failing field sobriety testing. He's now facing a slew of charges, including reckless driving, driving under the influence, illegal operation of a motor vehicle without minimum insurance, failure to drive in the proper lane on a limited access highway, improper parking, operating a motor vehicle without a license, and drinking while driving. Police say the 23-year-old was released on a $1,000 bond and is scheduled to appear in Hartford Superior Court on July 15th.
A bumbling Connecticut man reportedly earned himself a slew of charges last week after he allegedly tried to break into a municipal building, only to find himself helplessly trapped halfway through. The incident was uncovered around 7:30 a.m. on June 22nd when members of the Parks and Recreation Department in the city of Bristol came across an unusual situation while doing their morning rounds. Upon unlocking the Pavilion building in Rockwell Park, they found a man stuck inside the facility's chimney. According to reports, it quickly became clear that the man in question, 35-year-old Carlos Owens, had gotten himself stuck after trying to break in the previous night. He would later tell police that he had climbed into the chimney to try and rescue his dog, who was locked in one of the building's bathrooms. While the animal was found in the bathroom when the parks workers arrived, authorities say that what happened here is still a mystery. The Pavilion building's doors do automatically lock at 10 p.m. every night, but that means the dog would have had to have been inside before that time, and Owens would have had to leave. Though thankfully, neither the dog nor Owens were harmed because of the strange ordeal, apparently the same can't be said for the building itself. The Pavilion reportedly sustained an estimated $5,000 to $10,000 worth of damage when firefighters were forced to cut and remove pieces of the chimney to get Owens to safety. As for why the 35-year-old didn't simply call for help when his dog got locked in the bathroom, that appears to be anyone's guess, though some reports have stated police suspect that Owens might have been illegally living in the Pavilion building for some time. Following his rescue, Owens was promptly arrested and has now been charged with burglary, trespassing, and criminal mischief. A North Carolina landscaper is in hot water this week after police say he broke into a client's mansion and used it to host an unauthorized, chaotic house party. The whole thing went down on Saturday night, June 21st, when 37-year-old Michael Brown, the owner of a local business called Brown's Dream Team Landscaping, allegedly threw a massive rager at a private home in the Union County town of Weddington. The twist? Brown didn't live at the property. In fact, he wasn't even supposed to be there. According to the Union County Sheriff's Office, Brown used his previous access as the family's landscaper to enter the mansion while the homeowners were away on vacation, and then invited hundreds of people to party. Deputies say Brown advertised the event, likely through social media, and told guests to bring cash. It's estimated that between 300 and 400 teenagers and young adults showed up. Witnesses say the home was packed wall to wall with loud music, property damage, and signs of underage drinking. As the night wore on, the chaos spilled out into the neighborhood, and it wasn't long before deputies started receiving calls about noise, traffic congestion, and reckless driving. When officers arrived at the scene, they were met with a full-on disturbance and an accused party host who was determined not to tell the truth. At first, Brown allegedly claimed that the home belonged to him. Then, when that didn't fly, he said it was his grandparents' place. It was only after what officials called several more, quote, epic failures at telling the truth, that Brown finally admitted that he was the lawn guy and had no connection to the homeowners whatsoever. Deputies say that several agencies had to respond to the scene due to the sheer number of partygoers. In the chaos that followed, numerous people fled the area recklessly, resulting in multiple traffic stops. Inside the home, law enforcement found extensive evidence, including damage to the property and empty alcohol containers. They also recovered the money Brown had collected in entrance fees. He was arrested a few days later on June 24th and booked into the Union County Detention Center. In a press release, the sheriff's office joked that Brown, quote, was specifically told he was a guest, not a resident, and ordered not to throw any parties in our phone cell while trying to secure a bonding company. Brown now faces a long list of charges, including breaking and entering, second-degree trespassing, obtaining property under false pretenses, injury to real property, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. He has since been released on a $10,000 bond. In an interview with local news, Brown denied most of the allegations, claiming the whole thing was a graduation party for his son and his son's friends. He said the entry fees were only collected to cover potential damages and maintained that no alcohol was served to minors. Perhaps most bizarrely of all, Brown said he still expects to do landscaping work for the homeowners in the future. In his words, quote, I'm just waiting for them to come home, just so I can continue to build my relationship and we can move forward. In other words, it doesn't seem like Brown has gotten any better at telling the truth. At the time of this recording, no court date has been announced, but the case remains under investigation.
Authorities in Polk County, Florida say that a local teenager is facing charges this week after he allegedly made a series of unhinged threats against an employee at a fast food restaurant because they messed up his order. According to reports, the whole thing started late one night last week when the suspect in question, 18-year-old Dayton Schaefer, went to his local McDonald's in the city of Lakeland. After purchasing a $5 meal deal, he left, but later realized the business had forgotten to include the chicken McNuggets he had ordered. When Schaefer discovered this, he phoned the McDonald's and the manager immediately offered to make things right. However, the teenager apparently had a different solution in mind. In 3 separate phone calls, he allegedly went on unhinged and swear-word-laden rants against the restaurant and its employees, during which he reportedly threatened to, quote, shoot this shit up. Understandably concerned that Schaefer was going to return to the McDonald's and start killing people, the employees locked the place down and contacted police. They were able to quickly trace the calls to the 18-year-old, who was hanging out at his friend's place. And while he reportedly tried to claim his McNugget freakout was just a joke, police weren't buying it, and he was placed under arrest. Speaking of jokes, though, authorities made plenty at Schaefer's expense after he was taken into custody. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd recounted the situation in a video posted to the department's Facebook page a few days later. The video is filled with McDonald's-related wordplay, but personally, this is my favorite part.
It seems that maybe he didn't get his McNuggets, his chicken McNuggets. Well, you'll find in a second that this guy acted like a McNut.
At the time of this recording, Dayton Schaefer is now facing multiple charges, including felony misuses of a two-way communication device and false report of a bomb or weapon of mass destruction.
Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you'd consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.